Studio 6B shook with drums and brass as the band ran Johnny Carson's theme. Camera cables coiled across the floor, hot lights baked the set, and cue cards flashed in a page's hands. At Johnny's desk sat the king himself in shirt sleeves, tapping a pencil, grinning toward the empty seats, while crew laughed at a joke nobody at home would ever hear. Near the door, Earl Maddox stood in his cheap blue blazer, a laminated badge on his chest, and a different one, older and cracked, pressed into his palm inside his pocket. Sweat slid down his ribs under the blazer. He watched the prop man set a dark glass bottle on Johnny's desk, watched Johnny pick it up and do a loose sway, like he might fall off his chair if not for the laugh. Across from him, Dean Martin eased into the guest chair, shrugging off his coat, tie loose, smile easy. "Let's run the drunk bit," the assistant director called, and the room snapped tighter. Dean took the bottle, pretended a deep pull, then slumped in the chair with a lazy grin. The crew roared. Someone yelled, "That's gold, Dean." While everyone watched the stage, Earl stared at Dean's hand on that bottle. In his mind, it wasn't glass. It was twisted chrome and blood on blacktop, a siren wailing late, his own hand too shaky to snap a gun belt closed. Folks here loved the fun drunk. Earl knew the other kind. From the control room window, Frank Mallory glanced down, checking his watch. This bit was what the sponsors liked. Light, harmless. Out in your chair, maybe you've laughed at the same kind of gag. As you listen to this story, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments and share your memory. He'd made a promise at a grave. In every shift under those bright NBC lights was part of keeping it. Earl stood closer to the wall now, thumb rubbing the old badge in his pocket, eyes locked on the desk where that dark bottle waited. The band fell quiet. A red rehearsal light glowed over camera 2 like a warning he could feel in his teeth. On stage, Johnny leaned back in his chair and held the bottle by the neck. "Let's show him how not to drink, Dean," he joked, wobbling it for the crew. Dean played along, rising halfway from his seat, loose and slow, the perfect make-believe stumble. Laughter bounced off the rafters. A grip slapped another man's shoulder and said, "Man, that's classic." Near the dark doorway tape line, a teen page hurried past Earl with a stack of blue cards. Her elbow clipped the big yellow envelope under his arm. Papers slid to the floor, fanning out at his boots. At the top lay a court seal, black ink sharp as a bullet hole, and his grandson's name in heavy type. Next to it sat a date only 4 weeks away. Without thinking, Earl stepped over the bright gaffer's tape that marked the edge of the set. One more step, and his shoes left scuffed concrete for smooth stage wood. Heads turned, like someone had cut the sound. Pete Collins, the floor manager, swung around with his headset crooked on one ear. "Hey, security, back to the wall. Closed set means you too." Earl stopped, yet he didn't retreat. His voice came out rough. "You've got it wrong," he called, staring at Dean's hand on the glass. "Drunks don't look like that." Laughter thinned. Dean's smile slipped, and in the control room, Frank Mallory leaned closer. Collins dropped his clipboard to his side and strode toward Earl, headset cord swinging. "You want to keep this job, you get back on that wall," he said, keeping his voice low but sharp. On stage, Johnny still held the bottle in midair, eyebrows raised. Dean sat very still, eyes narrowed, watching the man who'd just broken the line. A door in the back of the control room opened, and Frank Mallory came down the stairs fast, tie loose, face tight. He stepped between Earl and the stage. "We got union guys, we got sponsors, we got a clock," he said. "What we don't have is time for security to give acting notes. Back to your post or out the door." Earl's hand slipped from his pocket. The cracked metal of his old badge showed between his fingers. "I'm not giving notes," he answered. "I'm telling you that thing there," he nodded at the bottle, "doesn't end in jokes, not for folks like me." A camera operator snorted. "What do you know about it, old-timer?" he muttered. Earl turned his palm up so they could see the bent star. "Name's Earl Maddox. Used to be Sheriff Maddox, Haskell County." His voice steadied. "I drank on that job. I missed a car I should have stopped. 2 miles later, a girl died against a tree, and that was the last day I wore this for real." The room's buzz faded. Johnny set the prop bottle down. Dean leaned forward in his chair, forearms on his knees. Frank folded his arms. "That's rough," he said, "but it's not tonight's show." "It is," Earl replied, "because you're selling what ruined that girl and damn near took my family. I've spent 8 years dry just trying to fix what I broke. Least I can do is say when you're getting it wrong." Down in the hall outside Studio 6B, air felt cooler, and noise from the set turned to a dull rumble. Earl sat on a hard plastic chair by the security stand while Collins filled out an incident slip on a clipboard. The yellow envelope with the court seal lay on Earl's knee, edges curled from his grip. From behind the reception counter, Linda Perez peeked over her glasses. "You all right, Earl?" she asked. "Pete said you stepped onto the floor." Her voice held worry, not scolding. On the small table between them sat a coloring book page, blue crayon left without its paper. Tommy had worked on it the last time Earl brought him in before a taping. Shaky block letters under a stick figure sheriff read, "My grandpa is a hero." After a long breath, Earl slid one sheet from the envelope and handed it to Linda. "Family court," he said. "Follow-up hearing." She scanned the lines, mouth tightening at the words about ongoing supervision and continued employment. The paper looked like any office form, but Earl saw chains in the sentences. Across the lobby, a page hustled by with a stack of fresh cue cards, hardly glancing at them. Linda lowered her voice. "If they put a write-up on you for messing with the show," she tapped the line that spoke of stable work environment, "they could say you're not steady enough." Near the elevator doors, a poster of Johnny's smiling face promised fun nights for the family. Earl studied that smile. Then the court seal on the page. "Tommy's had one drunk in his life," he murmured. "Judge gave me this job as proof I'm different now. If I lose it, they might take him. I can't let that happen, no matter what I said in there." Back on the studio threshold, Earl signed Collins' incident slip and slipped the pen into the tray. "Just stay by the door," Collins muttered. "No more speeches." Earl nodded. His heart still kicked hard, but he walked to his spot beside the exit sign and fixed his eyes on the floor tape. Out on the stage, the band ran a few bars while Johnny joked with a camera operator. Dean sat sideways in the guest chair, rolling the prop bottle in his hand. The bit was back on rails. From where he stood, he could only see their profiles, bright under the lamps, easy and loose. In his pocket, the crushed pack of cigarettes dug into his fingers. He hadn't lit one in years, but his hands always reached for them when nerves climbed. After a minute, he pulled the pack out and shook one free. The lighter felt heavy as a gun in his palm. A tiny click snapped when he spun the wheel. Flame didn't catch. His thumb slid again. Steel scraped. No fire. The cigarette bobbed between his lips because his fingers wouldn't hold steady. By the third try, his whole hand shook, knuckles white. Dean's gaze drifted from Johnny toward the red exit light. He saw the trembling hand, the dead lighter, the cigarette that never met flame. The smile fell from his face like someone had cut its string. Earl let the unlit cigarette drop into his palm. "Morning after my last drunk," he said softly. "Not sure who could hear. Couldn't pin my gun on, couldn't sign my own name. Girl's parents sat in the lobby, waiting for the sheriff, and I was in the back room shaking like this." The room went quieter than any rehearsal note ever had. Silence held for a beat after Earl spoke, like even the lights were listening. Then Johnny cleared his throat and forced out a little chuckle. "Okay," he said. "Let's take 5, folks." Chairs scraped, the band shifted to a soft riff, and low talk started again, thinner than before. From his seat, Dean set the bottle down very gently, as if it were loaded. He stood, smoothed his jacket, then looked over to Earl by the door. One tiny nod passed between them, not quite thanks, not quite promise, but something in between. At the director's station, a weary voice came over the floor speakers. "All right, reset the cold open. Martin wants another pass." A few groans rose, but people shuffled back into place. Johnny dropped into his chair again, rolled his shoulders, and picked up the bottle. In the control room, Frank Mallory watched through glass, jaw working. "As long as it plays," he muttered. "Viewers want Dean the lush, not a sermon." The tech beside him said nothing, fingers ready above the switcher. During the next run, Dean didn't swing as wide. He took the pretend sip, let his eyes cloud for half a second, then gave Johnny a crooked smile that looked nearly sad before he flipped it into a gag. "That's enough for me, kid," he said, patting the bottle like a rattlesnake. Laughter still came, but softer, edged with something new. By the wall, Earl heard it. Different, not fixed, yet kinder. His hands had stopped shaking, though his heart hadn't. He knew they hadn't torn the pretty mask off, they'd just cracked it. For the first time that night, he wondered if that small crack might be wide enough, later, for truth to walk through. Some doors only opened when someone bled a little. Crowds began to line the hall outside 6B. Chatter seeping under the studio door. Earl stayed by the exit sign, back to the wall, trying to look like nothing had happened. A hand brushed his sleeve. Dean stood there now, coat on, eyes not smiling. "Walk with me," Dean said. He led Earl down a side corridor, past stacked flats and fake doors, into a narrow space where cables twisted along the floor. The air smelled like dust and old paint. Dean rested a shoe on a coil of wire. "That girl you talked about?" he asked, voice low. "Tell me what really happened." Earl stared at his own boots for a moment. "Started with a phone call," he said. "Dispatch said a blue Chevy was drifting over the line out on Route 7. I was at the diner, nursing black coffee and a hangover. Told him I'd swing by after I cleared my head." He wet his lips. "Didn't swing by. Couple hours later, I pulled up on that same Chevy buried in a cottonwood. Driver dead. 16. Bottle on the floor. Same color as your prop." Words came slower, heavier. "Judge took my badge. State took my license. Jail took a few months. Whiskey took my wife while I was too drunk to drive her to chemo. Social services took my girl. When they came for Tommy, I finally sobered up." He slid the court paper from his pocket, held it out. "They said, 'You want that boy, you prove you're steady. Job, clean tests, no trouble.' NBC gig was my lifeline." Dean didn't touch the sheet. He looked Earl straight in the face instead. "Johnny jokes about the bottle," Dean murmured. "Network worries he believes his own act." A breath later, he added, "I won't play this like it's harmless. Not tonight. Not with that on my back now."
Red bulbs over the studio doors snapped to life, spelling "On Air" in hard red letters. The band hit the Tonight Show theme for real this time, horns bright, drums kicking deep in Earl's chest. Every seat out front was full now, faces turned toward the desk, ready to laugh at whatever came out of that man in the suit. Out under the lamps, Johnny slid behind his desk again, jacket buttoned, grin sharp as a blade. "We've got a legend with us tonight," he told the crowd, voice smooth as oil. The audience clapped on cue, already feeding off his energy. Behind the back row, Earl stood at his post just inside the door, shoulders square. From there, he could see Dean at the curtain, waiting for his cue, and the dark bottle on the desk catching white light. Somewhere above, Frank Mallory watched from the control room window, arms crossed. Dean walked out to big applause and a wave of whistles. He hugged Johnny, sat, and reached toward the bottle as the crowd chuckled, knowing what usually came next. His hand stopped halfway. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. "Folks think I drink like this all day," Dean said, letting his fingers rest near the glass but not on it. "Truth is, some of you at home know this thing's not always a joke." His eyes flicked, just once, toward the exit sign where Earl stood. "Sometimes it takes uniforms off good men, takes kids out of decent homes." Johnny's smile thinned, then steadied. "And sometimes," he added, sliding the bottle gently away from both of them, "a man smart enough to know when the joke stops." He looked into the lens. "We're gonna talk, not tip over." After a breath of stillness, the audience answered with warm applause.
Studio 6B slowly emptied like a tide going out. Crew rolled cables, the band packed their horns, and the red on-air light went dark. Earl stayed by the exit until Collins waved him forward. "We're clear," the floorman said. "House is out." Earl stepped onto the bare stage now, feeling strange without the roar. Johnny and Dean stood near the desk, talking with Frank Mallory. Frank's face looked tight, but not angry anymore. More like he'd bitten a lemon and decided to swallow it. Johnny saw Earl first. He lifted a hand. "Sheriff Maddox," he called, using the old title like he meant it. "Come here a second." Earl walked closer, hat in his hand, though he hadn't worn one all night. Frank spoke in a flat tone. "Phones'll like that little turn, Johnny. Sponsors, too. Responsible fun." His eyes cut toward Earl. "Just don't make a habit of letting security shape the monologue." Dean chuckled once. "Sometimes the guard's the only sober one, Frank." He reached into a pocket and pulled out a glossy photo, already signed. He pressed it into Earl's palm. "For the kid who drew that picture," Dean said. "Tell him I've seen a real hero now." Johnny picked up the bottle from the desk. No liquid sloshed. Props had rinsed it dry. He turned it in his hands, then held it out, bottom first. "You gave that thing teeth for me tonight," he said softly. "Made me look like I understood grown-up pain. Suits eat that up. I owe you, and I know it." From the side door, Linda stepped in with Tommy, his eyes wide. He watched his grandpa accept the empty bottle like a medal. If this kind of Hollywood story hits home, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Months later, rain ticked on the one small window in Earl's kitchen, while a black and white glow from the TV lit the room. Tommy sat at the table, math book open, pencil tapping out a slow beat. On the counter, next to the coffee can, the empty Tonight Show bottle stood like a tiny glass fence post, Dean's signed photo propped behind it. On the screen, Johnny did his monologue, older footage now running as a late-night repeat. Earl noticed things most folks at home would miss. There was still a coffee mug on the desk, but no bottle in sight. Jokes about hangovers slid by quicker, brushed off with a line about slowing down. He heard more talk about family, about getting home in one piece. The crowd still laughed, but the edge felt softer, wiser. Tommy looked up. "Grandpa, is that the night you met him?" he asked, pointing with his pencil as Dean walked onto the set. Earl smiled a little. "That's the night Mr. Martin helped me keep a promise," he said. He didn't mention the girl in the car, the grave, the court forms. Tommy didn't need those ghosts. He just needed the lesson. On the table lay a new paper from family court. Words like stable environment and full custody sat in clean type. The judge had written a note at the bottom. Employer reports excellent conduct. Earl had read that line 5 times already. He reached out and straightened the bottle in the photo, then set the court paper beside them. 3 pieces of his life, touching. A fall, a stand, and a future. From the TV, Johnny laughed with Dean about getting older. "We're not kids anymore," he said. Earl nodded toward the screen. "No, we're not. Thank God for that."
Most folks who remember that Tonight Show era think of Johnny's sharp jokes and Dean's lazy grin. They picture smooth nights, coffee on the table, music rolling easy from Doc's band. Hardly anyone sees the tired guard by the exit light, working off a second-chance paycheck and a promise at a grave. But without that man, the show you remember would be a little thinner, and the host you trusted might not have lasted. Johnny never told the full story on air. He didn't say, "Dean backed me when I needed to grow up," or "A guard with a cracked badge reminded me the bottle can bite." Yet that's what happened. Dean heard Earl's hard truth, carried it onto the stage, and gave Johnny room to step away from the cute drunk act before it swallowed him. In that way, Johnny really did owe Dean a debt, and Dean owed a quiet debt to the old sheriff by the door. Men like Earl don't fix the past. They can't raise the dead or erase the nights they failed their own families. What they can do is stand up, hands still shaking, and tell the truth while somebody powerful is listening. Sometimes that's enough to bend a story, save a job, or keep one small boy in the only home he's got left. This was never just about whiskey. It was about a man guarding his family's last bit of ground and refusing to let a lie raise his grandson. Out where you are, maybe there's a fun story folks tell that hides real hurt. Maybe you know someone standing by their own exit light, wondering if it's worth speaking up. If Earl's story hits home, tell us in the comments, subscribe for more, and keep your own courage burning bright.